I'm not hiding anymore. Just the walls I built to keep from feeling more. They're still here, but I'll let you see them now. Every layer, every stone, every vow.
Beautiful, gracias, Adrián. Oh,
Oh, my brother, my beloved brother who has birthed the gift of music into my life and glowed that in my life. And now I'm having some courage to show and play and be, the beginner and share and in kind of like the shade of your glow, and
thank you. Beautiful sentiment to share, and I just sense the willingness to show, which is so powerful. Showing yourself, and there's like this kind of magic that happens when you're willing to show something that's real, and then everything comes out. It's like, oh, I'm willing to be seen, and suddenly I realize how much it matters, how much, and how susceptible I am also to relationship, and it brings it all out. So it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Very beautiful to see you.
Oh. It's part of this medicine that we stumbled upon over and over in our relationship, and then we learned to consciously do it in our lives, in our family. And that, just like you said right now, I can feel, it's like you show something real, and then it invites almost like a relief of, I'm also going to share something. That we invite each other to share by being alive.
Absolutely. And we're invited to revitalize our experience as well, because it come into touch with what matters and something that touches us.
Yeah. And there's a theme here also that feels important to name for me from our brotherly experience. That me as an older brother, I I grew up with more capacity in certain ways. And then implicitly, I can also just shuffle in there that you had more capacity in very specific ways that were, about caring for love and in more preciousizing ways. And that as I grew up with this sense of, I more greater capacity across childhoodness and all of that, this part of what's been implicit and a teacher to me of our relationship has been that the panorama it's like a panorama or something from which, like, that I feel our childhood kind of like brought me into life was one of, life, Adrián, will be better if you share expansive things. Life will be better if you do that. You and the people around you will be better off if you share the good things, the things that are already successful, the things that are deemed, free or whatever it is. And then across the years, you and I have discovered and embodied the knowing that the experience that even when we share with each other the most difficult things that are most unprepared, that may feel disconnected or just not ready or even problematic, for that matter, even problematic, that when we actually share that with each other, the parts that I most, for most of my childhood and most of my life, for that matter, I didn't want to share very specific neighborhoods of my life with anybody. And our relationship has been maybe the most important ground of that development, where I experienced live the melting and the disbelieving of that culture. That was like, I came in and I looked that way to you, and many of our conversations, even in our family, I learned to do that. I learned to speak from, let me tell you about everything that's going well. And when I talk about what's going hard, it's like the way that I talk about it is about how I'm working on it specifically and how I'm like working on it. And so I feel that past history, that we have, because of our relationship, specifically because of you, for me, I have memories of moments in which I felt and I lived that through my own resistances of life and coming into moments of suffering, just to be maybe to give it grounded an example, there was a moment in which, in my own kind of just general suffering in my own life, that I encountered a wall inside of me that that was like a reluctance to be alive and to participate in life. And I remember one day that you and I were sitting in the garden of the home that we grew up in as adults, in which this part of my being, this resistance, came more online inside of me. And our relationship in the moment was big enough you were offering a big enough presence for me in the moment to welcome that I hated myself. And I had spoken those words to different people, like in different circumstances. To myself, I had said that to myself, I had done that. But something different happened that day. And what was different was that when I shared that with you, my brother, because you were there with me, because you are my brother, because of our relationship and the sense of the home that we are here for us here on earth, because of the seminalness and the, all of that, I shared about this self-hatred. And there was like in a way that I'd never shared before, in which I was able to say, like literally say it to you. And in the moments that I said, I hate myself, the moment that I said that, I suddenly, like part of what was coming online was a part of me that could witness more that piece inside of me, that part inside me. And what started to come online was the experience of the pain of doing that to myself. And before, I had felt the self-hatred and just the aversion, the intensity of that aversion inside me for a long, long time. And this extra oxygen, this extra room to be able to have like the spaciousness of the impact that I was having on myself was completely offline for a long time. And because of our relationship, in that moment, I suddenly started to cry. I started to cry and cry and cry and say, oh, like just it started to come online how much it hurt to hate myself. But it was through the tears, not through a logical, kind of like understanding of like, oh, I've been taught by society or by life, I shouldn't hate myself. But it was that I felt the pain of doing that to myself. And I was both able to include the part of me that was doing that in front of you, but it was like we were sitting in the garden, I was looking at you, I was sharing with you, and there was enough space in me to be able to like feel that part of myself and to be able to let it in, that I could like feel and see myself and include like almost like more space. And I started to cry in the realness of how much it hurt to do that to myself. And the moment that pain and that sense of that hurt came actually online, I gained the capacity to say, I don't want to do that anymore. And I had spoken those same words without the ground to be able to do it before. But it was inside of that relational field of our brothership, of our hermano-ness, that I was able to say that, and like little by little, that extra awareness came around to be able to give a hug to that. And I was able to release some of that parked tension, like that parked tension. Yeah.
Wow, let's just take a moment. Take a moment to appreciate, to honor that moment that you lived, and also the fact that we're able to share just now about the significance that had for you.
Yeah.
And honor and just look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels heavy. It feels heavy because the context, or I guess the context, the implication is that there was a lot of time in which you spent, first of all, developing the idea and the experience that you hate yourself, then a long time experiencing that without even being able to share it or to name it or to have space for it to exist in relationship. And I love that now you're bringing that moment from whatever years back now, because it feels like such a pivotal moment for me, in which I'm opening more up into the resistances that I've had to sharing and to being the entirety of my reality and the entirety of my experience with others. And that includes, everything from the deepest parts of my hurt, but it also includes parts of my gifts and my creativity. And so it feels like a breath and a little bit of ventilation that comes into this space. And an invitation, because it feels like there's enough resource here to be curious about, how was it that I spent all that? Now I'm talking about my own life, but obviously it relates to what you lived and what you live. How was it? Like, be curious about that. Like, how did I get to a place where I actually hated myself? Or how did that come about? And not with the perspective that, it's so wrong to hate yourself, I shouldn't do it, therefore I need to avoid getting close to it, but rather this genuine openness to approaching it, and which somehow was implicit in that moment that we shared in our childhood home's garden, which is beautiful and almost symbolic in a powerful way. But yeah, and I'm also just taking a moment right now to recognize the part of the invitation that you've just opened up, which is to recognize the implicitness of the love that's present. Because we spoke about this last time we had a little transmission, and the ground of implicit care is what we ended up titling the conversation. And somehow, through our relationship, the implicit care was enough resource for that moment of your openness to occur. And now in correspondence, I feel an openness for me to reach into the depths of my experience, and say that I too hate myself. I've hated myself, and maybe those exact words aren't the ones that I've been using, but I've been realizing that I've been insulating or alienating, and that below that action of isolation has been the belief that there's something that's ultimately bereft of value in my being, and that my life, my humanity, is not enough of a source of substance for it to be the fountain from which I share, for it to be the fountain from which I live and from which I act, and from where the dynamic, from where the gestures of my life unfold. And yes, consciously, absolutely. That's a good caveat, because it's important to notice that even when we're not conscious of us being the source of those gestures, we still are.
We're alive.
Yeah.
Wow, hermano.
Anyway, so thank you for that invitation, and also I feel the openness to enter more fully into the space of, you used this word before we came in, but of translucency and of transparency, and of trust. I recently heard that on a talk somewhere, someone said that in our current culture, trust can feel subversive. And there's something that resonated for me with that. And but there is an invitation to trust here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it started to hit me. I think we are trust. Yeah, like everything that we are invites more life to be like that. Like when you share with me something, I'm implicitly invited. Like that's what I'm realizing. It's like we are invitations for life. Everything that we say, everything that we do, and all our senses are all looking and learning. And so inside that, I feel like there's like a root of trust. It's like as if there was a statement inside every living being that was saying, hey, life, what about trusting living like this? As we unfold, as we do, as we live. That's like a side note. But the other part that feels really important here is to contextualize, I feel, just the care of contextualizing the just around the sense of the literacy and a little bit more about what self-hatred, what I mean by self-hatred when I use those words. And what I mean is a very strong, like basically with all my will, disposition to try to shut down what's trying to arise from inside, basically. And so there's a sense of where there is resistance. Well, in fact, this is part of what it is that I've tracked in my own life, is my aversion to either something in the news or a family member or a friend or community member. The parts that I really don't like, I feel a lot of aversion. If I follow the feeling about how much whatever it is that I don't like out there, I've always come back to find that there's something inside me that is parallel to what it is that I'm seeing out there, a quality that I relate to, that is what's fueling so much energy, that it's so reactive. I'm not talking about being angry about some suffering and an anger that's free. I'm talking about an anger that is a trigger. It's like it's right there and has no choice. It's like I feel it and I wish I didn't feel it so that I could go to sleep. I could rest, or that I could focus on something else. And that I've tracked down to an internal aversion towards the inside. And that's part of what I mean by self-hatred. And that that place of this kind of transparency, of being able to feel here with you, my brother, where it is that I and you we are showing ourselves to each other. And then what are the parts where we're not? Basically, where we're not disclosing, not showing. And in the parts where we're not, what are these doorways or these gates that are holding in the life that is there? And so I, in an effort of bringing more light, more visibility, decriminalizing, making it less cringy, or maybe cringy is kind of a light word to use, but I feel this calling to speak about this, to share about that is from this side, I can see inside myself, that ourselves, who we are, is incredibly powerful. Like if you, trying to close or shut down a child takes a tremendous amount of force. Their aliveness, just like their uniqueness and their power. I mean, children are so transparent and they say things that are so uncomfortable. I mean, it's so amazing. It's such a gift. They don't have those pre-cooked things yet. And so, but that part of that aliveness, there's many places where when we grew up, there was no space for parts of my aliveness to exist in relationship to our mother, our father, our different kinds of circumstances, we were way too busy doing very specific things that were the culture that we grew up in. And yet that aliveness was there. That aliveness was absolutely there. Potentially. There was potential of aliveness. And that's what it is that I mean with this neighborhood of this aversion, such an intense aversion towards myself, to try to keep certain feelings and certain alivenesses and curiosities and anger and energy that's wanting to play or to be or breathe or whatever it is. And so I'm mentioning all this in this way because the sense that my brother has the capacity to host that diversity of energy is part of what my system needed in order to be able to experience what I shared about. That to be able to show to you, it was it's incredibly vulnerable. It's like handing over the keys in a certain way of hey brother, I'm there's something that's irrevocably true in myself and real and happening inside, and I'm pushing it down. To bring air and light and words to that is so vulnerable, and there's an implicitness there. Also of probably, of a desire for relief. A desire for relief. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there was the container, or at least the openness for you to share, maybe in the form of my disposition or what you experienced as my disposition, which clearly was there. And then there was also your ability to listen to the call from your inner being that was clearly asking to come out, and had been asking to come out. And then that was combined with your willingness to remain in your heart. Because like you said, maybe those words had been uttered previously to others, but there was something different that day, and it landed in such a way that your heart changed, and your heart actually felt the spaciousness of having it be true while the words were being spoken, with nothing being held back. Nothing being held back, mind you, from this very intense, heavy statement, which maybe it's an aside, but it's just so interesting to note how in relationship we can experience an intense resistance to having the most intense, authentic experiences. And I think that that's worthwhile just, oh yeah, wait, let me sit with that for a second. I have an intense resistance to having an authentic experience, or to having the authentic experience of my most intense emotions. And that experience can be had in relationship, meaning that it's in a dynamic between two and between conversation and words and identities and cultures and past and futures, etc. But I also, because this is so, it feels like so experientially productive and also so heart opening, I'm curious if after that moment where you had that clarity, that disposition which we shared in that moment, you went through a process of identifying or of looking and having curiosity for the moments where you defined that experience for yourself.
The experience that we had?
No, the experience of what you're describing, which is that self-denial, and that you said self-hatred, and then you've elaborated, so I don't want to like
Yeah,
pinpoint.
totally.
But if you was it, let's say, did it give enough space to simply be able to feel it and to have that moment of openness between us? Or did that subsequently invite you to trace where that experience had been born, or that maybe the pattern or the, and I'm not talking about where to make it like a definite thing, but the neighborhood of experiences that informed your choice to sustain that self-denial and
Yeah, my sense is that imagine like cells in my body that are like sensory nodes were able to host the self-hatred more. So more of my body and not just my psychology, my mind and my heart, etc., but just the body that I am, was able to hang out with self-hatred. And also, part of what's really important to name here is the resistance. That's probably more than self-hatred. The moment that I got to the self-hate, every time that I got to that place of feeling it, actually a lot more life was flowing. I was feeling, even though it can be very hard, but it goes very quickly. The part that takes a lot more time and is like much heavier and harder is this piece around the resistance, the intense aversion. It's like, for those that are meat eaters, and this is a kind of a, should I give that example? It's like the difference between you're eating meat and then suddenly you start to like eat cartilage. And the feeling of a substance that is like super tough and like does not chew. Like, like that kind of experience. I mean, it can be with many other things, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
That, and I call cartilage also because it's like that. It's like a inside me. It feels like that. It feels like ligaments that are like inside. I can't feel. Like there's no feeling inside them, and yet it's very rigid and it's very, anyways, that it's like a sobriety process, like a becoming more sober, that, oh, this is what's happening and this is what's happening and this, oh, this is here too, and like that. And then whenever it is that I did, when I went, after the experience, it's like those parts of me could see, talk, share, like stop trying to make it not happen, stop trying to manage it. Like it was just a lot of energy that was, quote, kind of like in the freezing and the freezer, analogy that we've used over the other episodes, that comes from Thomas Hubel. Thank you. That there's a sense of essentially that it's a part of life that I can host. And so then from that place, specifically in regards to, do I or did I have like a sense of almost like, kind of like finding its home or its sense of being there, the connections and the roots of it, and etc. There's a sense in me of yes, there was a very natural process that was happening while I was sharing with you, before I was sharing with you, and after I was sharing with you, where I was having images that were inside the experience, like almost like associations, like dreams, like almost like not sleeping, but like the experience of that level of aversion, basically, and different kinds of images and different kinds of things, and certain moments where it became more lucid, that that the aversion and the intensity of the aversion, the nervous system neighborhood was very young. It was of me when I was a kid. Like that's the way that it felt. It felt, and for those whom don't use that language very much, it's simply, if you see a children are flooded by emotions, like much more than adults. And it's that part of that nervous system that, and the intensity and the level of disorientation, like sheer disorientation, that I was being able to host, and also the finding in certain moments that there was a grief, specifically with this example, there was a grief that was there, of like a fear, like an intense fear, that if I showed myself, I felt like a panic that I would hurt our mom. I hurt people around us, just around me, just in general. It was like very undifferentiated. But then as that undifferentiated sense started to become more sober, then it became clear I am terrified of making my mom suffer when I am seeing her suffer. Like that being like one particular thread that came online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's striking. I mean, on one hand, there's the experience that we have of being the source of suffering for those that we love, and how intense that is, and how foundational it can be for the way that we interpret this world and interpret ourselves.
Let's have a session on that one.
Yeah, and it's strange because it seems tied to this, I don't know if it's a neurobiological thing or what have you, that I am the source of experience as an infant or as a child. And it's interesting because it's like a two-sided thing, right? Because my mom, in a way, is the source of my experience, but also I associate myself with being the cause of the distress or whatever, or the joy or the happiness, in my mom or in whoever it is, my caretaker or the person that's mirroring me. And so it feels so good to just recognize that can easily happen, that I can witness the distress and the suffering in my mom as being the result of me, right? Me being the cause of that. And that can be something pre-verbal and also non-rational in the sense of like, oh, I didn't think it through, and it's not like
it's
I was
pre-rational
causality or anything. It was before that, and yet I attributed a very clear cause, which was me. So it's it's interesting how heavily those things can influence my conception of self. And then I was also just thinking, wow, how exciting and how interesting that we can develop into humans that can help others without, let's say, without having surpassed or having let go of the things that are difficult for us, and that there is like a different paradigm of help, which is something that we talked about last time. And I think it feels important because so many of us, and me personally, I want to help, and I find a great degree of meaning, of connection, of belonging when I feel like I can be of service. And yet there is this mistaken conception that I only help once I've figured things out on my, figured my own things out.
Exactly.
And I'm just thinking now back to that moment where whatever it was, and where I had an open heart and I was just being present, and that was enough. I didn't need to have the solution to solve your issues. That was enough to have a space where you opened up like never before, perhaps. And that kind of sharing and that kind of accompaniment and witnessing and being with can happen, and it can have a great impact without the need for us to feel like we've gotten all of our ducks in a row.
Dude, that phrase, feeling like I have all of my ducks in a row. That's like, that phrase is so...
so innocuous.
It's so innocuous, oh my God. And it's like, it's so also like, those all those words, proper, and like internally, it's kind of like showing up as a kind of like, whoop, like all my ducks in a row.
Totally.
And how seemingly, I think you used the word innocuous. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the word is, but that I need right now. But it's like it's used in a way that cements a disinvitation of life in a way that sounds flowery. That sounds nice. That's hilarious to me. Marco, you're talking, just what you're talking about, I feel so alive. When you said, like, this piece, we've touched on this theme in past episodes. There's this theme that it's about the medicine of transparency, like the medicine of transparency, and that and you're saying, oh wow, like that, so many of us that have lived for so long, feeling like, oh, it's only when I am developed enough that I'm ready for a relationship, or I'm ready to get married, or I'm ready to have kids, or I'm ready to who knows what. I'm ready to be able to help people, as you're saying, more essentially. And there's something here about the evolution of the field of help in the world that is here, that has to do specifically with part of the way that I'm learning to speak to it is that we are medicine. And specifically, we are medicine when we can learn to actually see each other. And that's part of what it is that we're doing here. We are bringing enough, because that's also part of what's here, is the implicitness that I tried to also name when I was giving the example of that opening that I had with you. That in our relationship, we have also benefited from all our ancestry and all of the potential that is there to be able to bring awareness to life. And but that when there's enough space and actual awareness that is present, then something magical happens where instead of postponing life by saying, oh yeah, I'll do that once 2 years from now, once I'm healed, or whatever it is, we can start to be in a field where, with this kind of culture and this kind of devotion to transparency, of respecting our limits, of all of this, we can be living the sense of connection with each other now. Not in 2 years. And by attuning, and that's very much in line with I've shared with you, I'm putting out a new offering called the Attunement Circle. That'll be on Wednesday mornings. That's on my site. And that it's not just that, it's I can feel the pulsation of this purpose, this sense of purpose of translucency and transparency flowing through as the backbone of my life. It helps me trust that's the way to move through in all my relationships, even in moments in which I'm receiving help, whether I'm giving or I'm receiving, that sense of translucence, of attuned translucence, bringing little by little, can create this field where, because surely, in the world, there's some beings that are much more free than you and I are. And then there's some beings that are less free than we are. But we're attuning at a pace that is in touch.
Yeah.
In touch. And that there's something magical there that I feel like that you were talking about just now, of the shift of that preconception.
Yeah, it's very much invited by I think the presence that we hold with one another, and yeah, I think that there's maybe presence naturally invites for a certain challenge of preconceptions, um, because it feels like pre-existing architecture is useful at a certain moment, and then we forget maybe just how much of an influence or of an impact it's having. And so being born again in the present is useful, and through relationship, because then it brings in the sense of community, and that it's not just like an isolated experience of, oh, I'm being born again and isolated. No, I'm being born again in this, through this relational field, which I think feels key. And then there's this intuition that I'm having, because it feels like a certain shift in, like you said, preconceptions, like what we come to the world with. And in particular, it feels useful to bring in this dynamic of not needing to have things resolved in order to show up, and have that be infused into the general culture of institution and organization and of society at large, because there's something, I think, evident, which is that there's a kind of latency that happens between these historical processes that are coming, whether it's in our family or whether it's in a company or a country or a culture or blah, blah, whatever, or an ecology, and then what happens in the presence and what's relevant in that moment. And so it feels like this openness and a kind of humility to say, oh, okay, I may not have things resolved, but I'm willing to have this presence right now, and show up, is what allows for the pre-existing conditions, and for everything that we're bringing along from our past, from our inheritance, our legacy, and our institutions, to be reimagined. And
that's the future.
Esperemos. No, it is. It is.
Yeah. Well, what I mean is, when that happens, we are actually
Yes.
welcoming the future. When we're not doing that, then we are reliving the past.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And so I think what you're just, yeah, anyway, we're touching on something that just feels so necessary to invite, because I also think of the stereotype or the archetype for what leadership is. And it feels not necessarily aligned with these principles that we're stating here, and with this experience of a leader who's willing to be vulnerable, right? That somehow feels counterintuitive, and in a sense, that's also maybe driving what feels like a scarcity of trust, because there's a reluctance to show what's there and to show that you may not have your ducks in a row. Well, then there's actually a difficulty in trusting. But there seems like to be a shift, because maybe in a previous paradigm, I don't care if they have their ducks in a row. I just want to have someone who's pretending, or even to have some like artificial confidence that I'm going to trust. And that feels like safety and security, as opposed to the substantive trust, which is to acknowledge that there's like this shared process of change and of humanity that is present at all levels, whether it's someone in a leadership role or not. So it feels relevant to this maybe greater and smaller social change
Ecology.
happening.
Yeah. Yeah, we're starting to see through the language that we're using, we're starting to be able to highlight the how we are replicators of awareness, and that if I am not wanting to be here, then I will invite you to be on a podcast with me where we are focusing on awareness in a way that reduces the attention on what's actually here and increases the attention on something else. And that we then apply that to a company or to a country or to any kind of system, that there's an the rejected, the internal rejected parts and qualities that are pushed down or negated or numbed, the places where we can't feel, are the liabilities that and the source of the sense of liability in our life, like the replication of all kinds of dynamics, such as a repetition of another war or another projection of power, because here we're seeing what's truly powerful integrates life. If it's disintegrating life, then how is that powerful? What's so powerful about creating division? Like about or destroying certain life. How is that powerful? And there's something here about this spectrum that you just described right now of that there's a past that we are that is trying to come in to life, and that when we include it, then a potential innovation actually happens in our relationship, in our work, and wherever it is.
Totally, and it can have this almost snowball effect because you brought up this sense actually at the beginning of the conversation you were talking about how I think it's because after I mentioned trust and the opening of trust and how it can feel subversive, whatever I said, but then you were saying how trust is an invitation, or how we are trust, and to me it connects to what you're saying now, to our susceptibility to the kind of culture that's implicit in the way that people lead their lives or lead their actions and gestures. But it's like the other side of the coin, maybe, or because we're so susceptible and so malleable to some degree, that we can be invited into trust just as we can be invited into deception, and and sometimes not even be conscious of the fact that we've been invited or that we've bought that invitation to either of those experiences. And I've been thinking a lot about just, our susceptibility, especially because I've been working with my own experiences as a child and things that I learned and I absorbed, and having that exercise of reimagining how susceptible I felt to behavior at that time. And then I was realizing, wait, I'm still really susceptible. I can walk into a room and I feel totally different because of what feels like the implicit dynamic present. And it happens every day. And I think it happens to us, when we turn on our phones or when we walk out the street, etc. And somehow, I guess I'd like to say that that's not a liability. That the susceptibility is it can be a strength and it can be a gift, and that it can be a source of agency and also something that helps us root our actions in the implicit care that we spoke about last time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, the implicit hope that is life, that life continues in this way, and that we are alive, and that there is an implicit goodness there, in that in being alive, and yeah, and also as we grow our sense of awareness, all of that, all of those contact hours of the susceptibility, it becomes more and more evident how beautiful life can become, like how much more beauty can be lived and manifested when we bring more transparency and this to any of those situations. And that any situation, social situations, any relationships, work, where we're in containers, in structures where it's not, where we are deciding and people around us are deciding to not talk about it, not look at it, make sure that we do blah, 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 whatever it is, then the liability increases basically over time. Because our being is also implicit is the desire to grow, the longing for growth that is
Mhm.
like essential in all of life, like all beings, all everything.
Yes. And there's like this, I feel like there's this this connection to the longing that you're saying, to be longing to be connected with the sense of growth and the sense of integration, and there's also just a longing to be connected with what's real.
The gift of the magnetism of the present moment, when all is done and I'm tired, like how sleep is like meditation, in the sense of like, I let go of the day. I just let go. I stop. And what stopping moves is towards imminence, of like coming into like a home of the present moment arising.
Mm.
That is there. That's implicit. And that's like, I'm not deciding that.
Hmm.
Like if it was, without that, who knows where I would end up.
I love that. Um, that meditation, that sleep as meditation, and also shifting the interpretation of sleep as like, oh, I go somewhere else. No, actually, no, I go deeper into the present. I go deeper into the now. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I've just found a little being here, another being that I haven't seen. It's with me, a little insect. um, oh, it's coming time for me to come to our close of our time together. Um, I have something I need to go to. I just realized, and yeah, but just maybe before anything with that, just being with what you just said, just being with each other here, ways that maybe there's something else that comes up for me, which is that as I slow down right now, I'm feeling like what I was attributing to like going into sleep and meditation and everything, like our relationship right here, right now, feels like also like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Adriana.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm wondering if you or I we could close with the with a little bit of music.
Mm-hmm.
How that feels. I could try doing the same thing
Sure.
that I did before, or if you want to bring something,
Yeah, I'll play a
make you
little.
feel amazing.
Um, living, living together. Breathing, breathing one another.